Welcome to the Business Blast podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wagner. This episode is brought to you by Authors Unite. Authors Unite provides you with all the resources you need to become a successful author. You can learn more about Authors Unite and join the free community at authorsunite.com. Now, let's jump into the episode. All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Business Blast podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wagner. Today I have Breanne Winter with us. She is the owner of Speak Up Consulting and Coaching, which helps businesses with their training and onboarding needs. So welcome to the show, Breanne.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thanks for joining us. We'll dive into the first one. The first question I have for you, Breanne, is what is the best story from your life that has an underlying valuable message?
Oh my goodness, so many to choose from. One thing that comes to mind is probably when I was doing my master's thesis, actually. And in my thesis, I was interviewing both novice and professional public speakers. And in order to do that, I had to reach out to the contacts that I had and kind of ask them for their help and who they could connect me with. And so I would probably say from that, always ask, because you never know where it's going to lead you.
And what's the most valuable piece of information we should know that's within your expertise or industry?
So my formal background is actually in communication, more specifically public speaking, nonverbal communication, sales, etc. So through those, I would definitely say that I have learned not just good business, but great business is all about building relationships with people, building those professional relationships, building that rapport, that credibility really is what the heart of it is. And that's why I focus on credibility coaching in my business. But I'd say it's definitely the foundation of doing a good business.
And it might tie in, but what's your best piece of overall business advice? So not necessarily industry specific.
Yeah. So mine, I would say, is be persistent. Always be persistent and professional. I can't tell you how many times I have either made that sale or made that connection with somebody simply because of being persistent and professional.
And if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
Had to think back a little bit on this one. I would probably say, don't be so hard on yourself. It's amazing what we think is such a big deal at the time really isn't maybe 5, 10, 20 years down the road. It's kind of a small thing. So I'd say just don't sweat the small stuff.
And again, this could tie in then too, but in your opinion, what is the key to happiness?
Wow, what a great question. I feel like we're all kind of searching for that at some point. I would say not necessarily find your passion, because I think that that's kind of oversaid at this point, but find your purpose. And I think that those are two different things. They correlate, but they're different. And find that purpose, really what that calling is for you, and follow that every day. One of the things that really helped me with that and finding that mental clarity is meditation. It's amazing what it'll do.
Agreed. And what is the best book that you've read, and what was the number one thing you learned from that?
Yeah. So one of my favorite books is actually called The Present. It's by Spencer Johnson. And I wouldn't necessarily say it was the content in it that I learned the most from. It was how it was written, even though the content is great. It was how the book was written, though, and it talks about success and focusing on the present. And it's really written in a way that it's a story, and it kind of just makes you follow along, and the story wraps you up in it. And so it's kind of just a different viewpoint. So that's really what I took away from the book, is in different situations, how to think about those in a different way.
And what is your favorite quote and why?
Oh, my favorite quote. It is, the most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't being said. And it's by Peter Drucker. Obviously, I've mentioned that nonverbal communication is part of my background, so I definitely put an emphasis on nonverbal communication. But I also believe that really reading between the lines and taking in the entire communication package, if you will, or the entire message, not just the words that we speak, is what true and meaningful communication is really all about.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on. The last question I have for you before we let you go is, where is the best place for people to find you online?
You can find me at www.speakupcc.com, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn too.
Perfect. Thanks again. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
The podcast you just heard was published with Anchor. Got something you want to say to the creator of this show? Send them a voice message using the Anchor app, free for iOS and Android.